Hello everyone, my name is Amber Ferger and I'm here to present to you Group Project 1 for DATA620 Web Analytics in the Summer 2020 session. My group members are Misha Kollontai, Zach Alexander, and Suba Rout. So the instructions for this assignment were simple. We had to identify and load a network dataset that had some categorical features. For each of the nodes in the dataset, we had to calculate degree and eigenvector centrality. And then we had to compare these centrality metrics across the different categories. The dataset that we chose to use was one from sociopatterns.org. This network is composed of interactions between students and their classmates, as well as the teacher, in a 2-day study. Each node in the network represents an individual, so this could either be a student or a teacher, and the edges represent the face-to-face interactions. Now for this project, we're only going to focus on day 1 of the interactions, and within this network there are 236 nodes and 5,899 connections. So each node, which represents an individual, has 3 different attributes. The first is the class name, which represents the school class and grade of the individual, the gender, and then there's also visualization components, including the color, size, and position of the node in the network. And each edge has 2 assigned weights. The first is the duration, and this is the total time of the interaction between 2 individuals in the network. And the second is the count, which is the frequency of interactions between those 2 individuals. Our motivation behind this project was to answer one primary question, which was, is there a difference in the connectedness, as defined by both the degree and eigenvector centrality, between males and females in the network? We chose to use the gender as our categorical feature because we thought it would be interesting to see if males or females tended to interact more. So ultimately that question, the answer would tell us, 1, if interactions happen with a larger number of individuals, which is the degree centrality, and also 2, if those interactions happen with individuals that are also having a larger number of interactions. As a follow-up to that, we wanted to know if there was any difference in duration and frequency of interaction between the genders. And that is likely to tell us if one gender tends to have longer and more frequent interactions with their peers. For this project, we used a bunch of different packages. We used networks, pandas, matplotlib, scipystats, numpy, and statistics. So you can see right here that we're just loading in our network, and we can confirm that the number of nodes is 236, and the number of edges is 5,899. The average degree in the network is just about 50, so we can see that most individuals in the network are very well connected to one another. We can also see what information is stored about each node and edge. In this example, we've just taken node 1789 and edge 1789 to 1821. We can confirm that each node has 3 different attributes, the class name, gender, and viz. And then also that viz contains the color of the node, the size, and the position. And then for our edge, we can see the 2 different weight attributes, the duration of the interaction, as well as the count. So the first thing we'll do is we'll look at the node attributes, and we'll take a look at the class name. What we're doing here is just showing that there are 11 distinct class names within the network, and one of those class names actually represents the teachers group. And out of the network, we can also see that there are 10 distinct teachers within all of the within all of the nodes. Looking a little bit closer, we can get a little bit more information about the teacher class name, and we can confirm that each teacher and each class within the network has its own specific color associated with it. So you can see here that class 3A is associated with this red, green, blue value. What's interesting to note is that there are only 10 different distinct color values within the network, which means that the one that's left out, our teachers, is colored white ultimately. So now that we've looked a little bit at the characteristics of the network, we can visualize it. So this is a very rough drawing of what the network looks like. It's a little cluttered, I can't really tell what's going on. So what we've decided to do is take those RGB values and convert them to hex so that we can more easily visualize the structure of the network with respect to the different classes. So that's what we're doing here. We've chosen to draw a spring graph, and as we expected, the teachers are represented by white nodes, and then all of the different classes are represented by different colors. And you can start to see some clustering here. Typically the students that are within a class interact with each other. We can also take a look at the nodes by gender. So what we've done is we've colored teachers are, once again, white, females are red, and males are blue. This doesn't really tell us much about the network. We can see one small cluster over here of all female interactions, but for the most part, the connections are gender agnostic, meaning that females and males tend to interact with each other on a regular basis. We can now calculate our centrality metrics. So the first thing that we'll do is calculate the degree centrality, which represents the number of connections that any particular node has within the graph. And then we'll also calculate the eigenvector centrality, which represents how well connected an individual is, and the individuals that they're connected to, how well they're connected to everybody else in the network as well. So what we've done is we've assigned a new attribute to the nodes called centrality and then eigenvector centrality, and we've also split those centrality into different lists based on gender. So for example, this first one represents female degree centrality, and this last one represents male eigenvector centrality. And the reason why we do this is so that we can compare the averages between the genders. So a first look at the degree centrality shows us that on average, females tend to interact with 46 individuals, whereas males tend to act with around 54. Doing a t-test on this information shows that this is a statistically significant difference because it's less, the p-value is less than 0.05. So from this, we can conclude that the average degree centrality of the female population is statistically significantly lower than the males. So on average, males tend to interact with more people than females. We can do a similar comparison of the eigenvector centrality. Once again, we see that females tend to have a lower centrality than males do, and this is confirmed with the t-test as well. So this means that males tend to be connected to other highly connected individuals. So that kind of answers the first question that we were looking at, which gender tends to have more connections to other individuals in the network, and we've confirmed with the t-test of both the eigenvector centrality and the degree centrality that males tend to have more interactions. But this wasn't all we wanted to look at. We also wanted to see if the duration and the frequency of interactions differed between genders. So what we'll do here is we'll split the network once again into the female and male nodes, and we'll create separate subgraphs for each and identify the counts and the durations of the interactions based on gender. And once again, we'll do a comparison of the average first interactions, so this is the frequency of interactions. And we can see here that on average, females tend to interact about 7.6 times with their connections, whereas males tend to interact only 6.7 times. And we can confirm with a t-test that the p-value is less than 0.05. So this means that females tend to interact more often with the individuals in their network than males do. Further, we can look at the duration of the interactions, and we can confirm here that on average, females tend to interact for about 286 seconds with their connections, whereas males tend to interact only for 209 seconds. This is confirmed with the t-test as well. The p-value is less than 0.05. So although we've shown initially that males tend to have more interactions tend to have interactions with a higher number of individuals in the network, females tend to have both longer and more frequent conversations. So the last thing that we did was we visualized this information. First, we wanted to look at the degree centrality, and to do this, we first colored the nodes based on the centrality metric. So in this case, we're just doing degree centrality. Darker colored nodes represent individuals with a higher degree centrality, whereas lighter ones represent those with a lower degree centrality. And we also colored the node edges based on the gender. So red is female and blue is male. And we've chosen to delete all of the connections within the graph just so you could see the actual attributes of the nodes. And what this shows us is that we see a higher number of individuals with yellow nodes that are females, so we can identify that by the red edging and the yellow color of the nodes. And more males, which are blue edging, have more connections and are colored darker. So this was interesting to see. We can also look at the duration of the interactions. So for this particular visualization, we've colored the weight edges according to the duration. So lighter edges represent shorter conversations and darker represent longer. And then we also colored the nodes based on gender. So blue represents males and red represents females, and white once again represents teachers. After a lot of different trials and errors, this is what we came up with. It doesn't show us too much about the edge weights. We can see that some of the female nodes over here tend to have more red interactions or longer interactions. But for the most part, it just is kind of a visualization that shows the information. We did something similar with the frequency of interactions, so the nodes and the edges are colored similarly. This doesn't show us much. We can't really see a glaring difference between the males and the females in the network, but what we can see is that most of the edges are colored yellow, which means that most of the edges most of the interactions tend to happen at the same frequency. However, we do have some outliers, which indicates that those tend to be a lot more interactions than the average in the network, and that's between both females and males in the network. We also tried to visualize this across genders, so we split out the female subgraph and the male subgraph separately. You can see females are colored in red nodes and males are colored in blues. One thing to note with these two visualizations is that they only represent the inter-gender interactions. So the red lines here represent high interactions between females to females, and then also the red over here represent higher interactions between males to males. So although this doesn't really tell much about the differences between females to males, we thought that it was interesting to look at the different subgraphs of males and females within the network. So ultimately, what did we gain from this project? Our initial research question was, do males or females tend to be connected to more individuals? And we confirmed both through the degree and eigenvector centrality that males tend to have more connections than females, and that they also tend to be connected to other individuals that are highly connected. However, after further analysis and visualization, we were able to determine that although males tend to interact with more people, females tend to have a longer interaction with the connections that they have, as well as longer. So we thought this was interesting, although the initial project asked us to look just at the degree centrality and eigenvector centrality. We found some results that were kind of contradictory in the sense that males interact more with people, or interact with more people, and females tend to interact for longer and more frequently. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and thank you very much.